My own mom helped my cheating wife hide her affair and tried to trap me with a baby that wasn't mine. So I uncovered the truth and got the ultimate revenge. My own mother took my wife's side after she cheated on me and tried to pin another man's baby on me. It wasn't until I pieced things together that I realized my mom had been helping my wife hide her affair for weeks. So I planned the ultimate revenge. A month ago I found out my wife Helen was cheating. I planned to surprise her at work for a nice evening out. Maybe dinner, a late movie, something to bring some joy into our lives. When I got to her office, I immediately saw her car. It was unusual for her to be there so late, and I wondered why. I called her, thinking I'd ask if she was up for my surprise. As the phone rang, I heard her ringtone coming from inside her car. Confused, I walked closer, peered through the window and saw her. Helen, the woman I loved and trusted, was in the car, but she wasn't alone. She was passionately kissing a man I immediately recognized. For a moment I couldn't move. I stood there, frozen in shock. My heart seemed to stop as her eyes suddenly opened and met mine. Pure panic washed over her face. She quickly pulled away from the man, her mouth opening and closing as she struggled to speak. Fear and guilt were written all over her. The other man, who hadn't noticed me, turned around and his face drained of color as he realized who I was. This wasn't some stranger, I knew him. I'd met him at several of Helen's office Christmas parties. We'd shared drinks, joked around, and even connected on social media. I knew his wife was pregnant, expecting their child at home, while he was here, betraying her just as my wife was betraying me. The sickening realization hit me like a tidal wave. My plans for a romantic surprise crumbled into a gut-wrenching reality I never saw coming. Helen, clearly shaken, tried to explain. She stumbled over her words, insisting it was nothing, just a one-time stupid mistake. Her voice was strained, as if trying to convince both of us it meant nothing. But how could I believe that? I had just seen my wife passionately kissing another man. The man also ran after me, panicked and desperate. He begged for my forgiveness and pleaded with me not to tell his wife. The sheer audacity of it all sent a surge of anger through me. Here he was, caught betraying not only me but his pregnant wife, and his only concern was keeping his secret safe. At that moment all I felt was a furious rage so intense I could barely see straight. I knew if I stayed any longer I might lose control. So without a word to either of them, I turned and walked straight to my car. I didn't even look back as I got in and drove away as fast as I could, needing to get far, far away from them. My hands gripped the steering wheel tightly as I tried to focus on the road, but the pain was overwhelming. I couldn't stop replaying the moment, like a twisted, inescapable loop. I drove for what felt like hours with no destination. I just needed to move, to escape the sudden reality of my life. Eventually I found a secluded spot far from the city, parked, and let everything hit me. The pain, the betrayal. It all crashed down and I broke down, crying harder than I had in years. How could this have happened? How could someone I trusted with everything? Helen and I had been best friends. We'd shared our lives, our dreams, our future. Now it was shattered. If I hadn't seen her kiss that man with my own eyes, I would never have believed it. If someone had told me she was cheating, I would have laughed it off as a ridiculous rumor. But there was no denying the reality now. It was like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. When I finally got home, my mind was made up. There was no going back. As soon as I stepped through the door, I went straight to the bedroom to pack my bags. Helen was already there, her face tear-streaked and etched with panic. She rushed toward me, her voice shaking as she pleaded with me to stop. She insisted we could work through it, that it wasn't too late and we could talk things through. But how could words ever repair the damage of what I had witnessed? I was filled with a mix of anger and overwhelming sadness, and her attempts to calm me only fueled my frustration. Every word she said bounced off me like a wall. She didn't seem to understand that nothing could undo what I had seen. I yelled that no matter what she said, I could never live with a cheater like her again. My trust in her was shattered. No amount of talking, apologies, or promises could piece it back together. The thought of kissing her, touching her, or being intimate with her again felt impossible. Knowing what I knew now, knowing she had been with another man. That image was burned into my mind, and no matter how much she begged, it wouldn't leave. I made it clear that the only thing left for us was divorce. I had no desire to work through anything or fix something that, in my eyes, was beyond repair. The moment I mentioned divorce, she broke down completely. Tears streamed down her face, and she started sobbing uncontrollably, begging me for a second chance. She promised over and over that she loved me, couldn't live without me, and would do anything to make things right. But her words felt hollow, too little too late. I didn't listen to her pleas, I couldn't. The hurt and betrayal were too fresh, too raw, and I knew deep down that nothing she said would change how I felt. Without another word, I grabbed my bag and walked out. I checked into a small motel, trying to figure out my next step. For the next few days, I just woke up, went to work, came back to the motel, stared blankly at the TV, and cried myself to sleep. I didn't tell a soul what had happened. I felt ashamed, even embarrassed by what Helen had done. How could I explain to my parents or closest friends that the woman I loved, my wife, had cheated on me? I was still processing it myself, still in shock, so I kept everything bottled up. I went to work as if nothing had changed, keeping my head down and avoiding conversations. I didn't want to face the pity or questions that might come if people knew the truth. My phone constantly buzzed with messages and calls from Helen, but I couldn't bear to speak to her. Every time her name flashed on the screen, it felt like a punch to the gut. I ignored her calls and let her voicemails pile up. Twice, she even showed up at my office trying to talk to me face to face, but I refused to meet her. Then about a week later, my dad called me. When I answered, I could hear the concern in his voice right away. He asked how I was doing, where I'd been, what was going on. He told me Helen had told him everything. My heart sank at the thought of my parents knowing, but at the same time there was a strange sense of relief. I didn't have to carry the weight of the secret alone anymore. My dad urged me to take some time off work. He could hear the exhaustion in my voice and told me I needed to focus on my mental health. He said I should come home, stay with them for a few days, and get away from everything. I was running on fumes by this point, completely drained emotionally and physically, so I took my dad's advice and drove to their house. As soon as I pulled into the driveway, my parents were waiting for me. They pulled me into a tight hug. I didn't have to say anything. They could tell from the look on my face and my disheveled clothes that I was not okay. My parents told me to go upstairs and rest. I was grateful for their quiet support. It was exactly what I needed at that moment. For the first time in days, I felt like I could breathe again. Later that evening, after I'd rested, my parents and I sat down to talk. I knew they were concerned, and I felt ready, albeit uneasy, to finally open up. Before I started, I asked them what Helen had told them. My dad cleared his throat and said Helen had called them and admitted to stupidly kissing another man. But then she framed it as if I had impulsively walked out of the marriage, without giving her a chance to explain or work things out. Hearing this, I couldn't help but shake my head in disbelief. It was incredible how she could downplay what had happened, as if it was just a minor mistake, rather than a complete betrayal. I took a deep breath and recounted the whole story. From the moment I saw her in the car with that guy to how I stood there frozen as everything crumbled before my eyes. My hands shook as I relived the humiliation and hurt, and my voice cracked more than once as I told them the details. My dad seemed visibly shaken too. He reached out and squeezed my shoulder, reassuring me that if I didn't want to stay with Helen, I absolutely shouldn't. He told me he understood why I no longer wanted to be in the marriage and had my back. It felt good to hear him validate my feelings. But my mom had been quiet the entire time. I glanced over at her and saw she was hesitating, her brow furrowed in thought. Then she spoke up, asking a question that threw me off balance. "Have you really thought this through?" Her words stung. I wondered how she could ask me that after everything I had just poured out. I looked at her, my frustration clear, and told her that of course I had thought it through. How could I not? I took my wedding vows very seriously. However, this betrayal was too deep. How could I ever stay with someone who had cheated on me? But then my mom continued, gently yet firmly, suggesting that maybe instead of throwing away my marriage, I could give Helen a chance to explain herself. She mentioned how remorseful Helen had seemed when she spoke to them and that perhaps with time and effort, we could work things out. As she spoke, I felt my stomach twist in knots. The very idea that my own mother was asking me to consider staying with someone who had betrayed me so deeply felt like a second betrayal. I was dumbfounded. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. How could she, of all people, support the idea of me staying in a marriage with someone who had cheated? My dad must have sensed my anger and disbelief because before I could say anything, he snapped at my mom. He told her she had no right to defend a loose and characterless woman like Helen over her own son. But my mom didn't back down right away. She continued to argue that marriage takes compromise and sacrifice, that no one is perfect and mistakes can happen. She kept pushing the idea that maybe this was something we could get through if we just gave it time. But the more she talked, the more I felt sick to my stomach. The truth was, my mother had always loved Helen like a daughter. Helen and I had been together since high school, and she had been a part of our family for as long as I could remember. My mom had seen Helen grow up, shared countless memories with her, and probably never imagined a life where we weren't together. Helen's family and mine were extremely close. Holidays, family dinners, vacations, we had all been one big unit. For my mom, this wasn't just about me and Helen. It was about losing someone she cared about, someone she considered part of our family. My mom, my dad, and even Helen's family would all be affected by this. And while I understood why my mom was struggling to accept it, it didn't change the fact that Helen's actions had crossed a line that I couldn't come back from. I appreciated her concern, but I couldn't follow her advice. Over the following days, I did what I needed to do. I spoke with a lawyer to start the divorce proceedings. I was originally planning to meet Helen at our place to serve her the papers, but she insisted on coming to my parents' house. Part of me didn't want to involve my parents any more than they already were, but I agreed, figuring it was better to get this over with. When Helen arrived, she started telling me how much she had missed me. Her words felt empty, almost mocking, after everything she'd done. I told her to sit down so we could discuss what needed to be said. My parents were already aware of what was coming. I had told them I would be serving her the divorce papers, and while I could feel my mom's quiet unease about it, I had asked her not to interfere. However, my mom, true to form, greeted Helen with kindness. They even hugged, which made my blood boil. It angered me that my mother could still be nice to someone who had hurt me so deeply. Then, before I could say anything to Helen or hand her the divorce papers, she pulled something out of her bag. It was a pregnancy test. She placed it on the table between us and announced, "I'm pregnant." I looked at her wide-eyed. I picked up the test, checking it as if that would somehow make it feel more real. It was positive. I looked back at Helen's face, searching for any sign that this might be a cruel joke, a last-ditch attempt to stop the divorce. But no, she just smiled at me and said, "I'm pregnant with our baby." I scoffed at her, not hiding my contempt. "This isn't my baby," I said flatly. "It's probably that other guy's baby." Helen looked shocked and offended that I would even suggest it, her face flushing with indignation. She started arguing right away, insisting that the affair with the other man was a mistake, and that they had only slept together once or twice. She even had the nerve to tell me that she'd been careful, as if that would somehow make it all better. Hearing her admit they had slept together made me feel sick to my stomach. I had suspected as much, but this was the first time she actually said it out loud. Until now, she had never given me any details, and I hadn't asked because knowing would only make it worse. But now she was admitting the truth little by little. I cut her off, my voice sharp and unwavering. "People get pregnant even when they use protection, Helen. There's a 50-50 chance of this baby being mine." The fact that she was trying to frame this pregnancy as some kind of saving grace for our marriage. I handed Helen the divorce papers. As she took the papers and looked at them, her face crumpled. She started to cry, and for a moment, I wondered if she was crying out of guilt or fear of losing control of the situation. My mother, seeing this, rushed to her side and tried to console her. She rubbed Helen's back, whispering softly, as if she was the victim in all of this. Then my mom looked up at me and said that I shouldn't burden a pregnant woman with divorce papers. My mom then tried to reason with me, telling me that this baby could solve everything, that instead of divorcing Helen, now was the time for me to forgive her and go back home. Felt like a slap in the face. Before I could even respond, my dad stepped in, his anger boiling over. He shouted at my mom, furious that she was supporting Helen after everything she had done. He told her that without a paternity test, we had no proof that the baby was even mine, and that she shouldn't try to force me into taking on the burden of a child when Helen had been unfaithful. My dad was right, of course. Then my dad turned to Helen, his voice firm, full of disappointment and anger. He told her that after everything I had done for her, after years of marriage, cheating on me was the worst thing she could ever have done. I could see the shame on her face as his words hit her. My dad even said he planned to speak with her parents about all of this. Her sobs grew louder. She seemed genuinely embarrassed. But that didn't change anything. What was done, and no amount of tears or regret would undo the damage she had caused. Over the weeks after serving divorce papers to Helen, I started noticing my mom acting really strange. She began going out more often, using vague excuses about meeting friends or running errands. Normally, this wouldn't seem odd, but she'd leave for hours, returning home late, and always seemed to be on her phone, speaking in a hushed voice whenever I entered the room or walked by. She'd abruptly end the call or quickly put her phone away, like she was hiding something. It became too obvious to ignore, and I started to feel uneasy. Once or twice, I flat out asked her if she was in contact with Helen and meeting up with her. After all, Helen had made a big scene with the pregnancy announcement, and I knew my mom was the only one who wouldn't entirely let go of the idea that the baby could be mine. But every time I asked, she'd brush it off with a quick, dismissive answer, acting like I was imagining things. My dad had also picked up on her strange behavior. We both knew something wasn't right. Then, about a week ago, I was working from home. I had resumed work after my break, and my boss was kind enough to allow me to work from home for a while, understanding the emotional toll I was going through. On this particular day, my laptop was acting up, and I had an important meeting, so out of desperation, I asked my mom if I could borrow her laptop. She didn't hesitate and handed it over without a second thought. I attended my meeting and was just working on a few things when a notification popped up on the screen. Her laptop was connected to her iCloud account, so I could see it was a message from Helen's number. My curiosity got the better of me, and I clicked on the message. What I found only confirmed what I had suspected all along. Helen was asking my mom if they could meet up in their usual spot. I scrolled through their messages and saw they were having full conversations about the pregnancy, about me, about how my mom could help fix the situation. My stomach churned as I scrolled. Helen was trying hard to manipulate my mom into convincing me that the baby was mine, using my mother's love for her to get back into my life. And my mom, blinded by her attachment to Helen and this unborn child, was buying into it. She was excited to become a grandmother, and was talking about how she couldn't wait to hold her baby. I sat there staring at the screen, feeling a mixture of anger, disappointment, and sadness. Then, as if this situation couldn't get any more complicated, I scrolled further up in the messages and stumbled upon something that made my heart sink. Just weeks before I discovered my wife's affair, my mother had actually found out about Helen and the other man. A friend of hers, who knew me and Helen well, had sent a photo to my mom which showed Helen clearly sitting closely with a man and looking intimate. It was the very same man I had caught her with. My mom, instead of forwarding the picture to me and telling me the truth, had instead forwarded it to Helen, asking her what she was doing with this man. Obviously, Helen, being the manipulative narcissist that she is, had tried to downplay the photo when my mom confronted her, claiming he was just a coworker, and that there was nothing between them. My mom had doubled down on her and told her that she didn't believe her excuses, and urged her to come clean. This was when Helen came clean. She had literally admitted to having an affair with this man because she had been feeling lonely. Helen then had promised my mom that she would break things off with the guy and had begged her not to tell me anything, as it would affect our marriage. My mom naively had believed her since she loved her like her own daughter, and trusted her to do the right thing. My mom had agreed to keep my wife's affair a secret from me under the assumption that Helen would actually follow through and end the affair. But Helen never broke things off. She continued her relationship with the man right up until the moment I caught her in the parking lot. The day I had come to my parents' house after discovering the affair, my mother must have already been fully aware of the extent of Helen's betrayal, yet she had still been defending Helen instead of me. I was at a total loss for words. I had just been blindsided by my wife's betrayal, and now I was discovering that my own mother had been complicit in this deceit. It felt like a double betrayal, and I could hardly process anything. Since the past few days, I've been observing my mother quietly. She continues to meet up with Helen as if nothing is wrong. Sometimes she even brings up the topic of me in front of me, trying to change my mind about the divorce. My mother is clearly unaware that I have discovered the truth. Update 1. First of all, Many of you have expressed concern about whether I ever informed the other man's pregnant wife about his affair with Helen. Honestly, I did. I've been so consumed by my own grief that I couldn't figure out how to break the news to her. However, after reading all your comments, I've decided to reach out to her on social media and send her a message about it. Secondly, if this baby turns out to be the other man's, there's no way he can continue to hide his affair with Helen. She's very self-serving, so she will definitely take him to court and make him pay child support as she should. Lastly, yes, my wife and I had been intimate right up until I discovered her affair and moved out. There is definitely a chance that the baby could be mine also, which is why I haven't dismissed it completely. However, I will need a paternity test before I ever accept it. Update 2: I decided to call Helen and her family over for lunch to have a sit-down discussion with my parents. My mom seemed pleasantly surprised by this and must have thought that perhaps I was rethinking the divorce. Obviously, she had no clue what I had planned for them. Helen's parents seemed remorseful when they met me. They had known me for so long and apologized to me on behalf of Helen. Unlike my mother, they blamed Helen completely for why our marriage had broken down. Their support reaffirmed my stance. I asked everyone to sit down as I informed them that I had gathered them all so that I could reveal the entire truth about Helen's affair. My mother's eyes widened in confusion as my dad asked, "What are you talking about?" Taking a deep breath, I pulled out the printed papers, screenshots of the conversations between Helen and my mom over the past few months. I watched both their faces drain of color as I laid the evidence before my father and Helen's parents. I showed them everything and explained how my mother had, in fact, known about Helen's affair with a man for weeks and how she had knowingly helped Helen hide the affair by keeping the truth from me. My dad's expression shifted as he read through the messages. The disbelief was evident in his eyes. He asked my mother directly, "Is this true?" But instead of answering, her face flushed with anger. "You have no right to read my private messages." She started to accuse me, her voice rising. "I wasn't sure about this. I just didn't want to break your marriage by telling you about that photo. I truly believed Helen would leave that man. I thought she'd come to her senses." Her tone was defensive, but I could hear the cracks in her reasoning. She went on, justifying her actions, saying how she knew Helen could have never done something like this knowingly, and that she was perhaps lost in her life, which is why she had become distracted with the other man. Helen, sitting across the table, jumped in to support my mom, telling me how what she had told my mother was true. She had been working up the courage to break up with the man and would have definitely broken things off. I scoffed at them both, the absurdity of their excuses washing over me like a wave of disgust. "You were both complicit in this, Mom. You had every opportunity to tell me the truth, but instead you chose to protect her. Do you both even realize how much this hurts? Do you understand what you've done?" Everyone sat there silent, taking in everything. Then, unexpectedly, Helen's mother spoke up, breaking the silence. She turned to my mother, her tone firm but compassionate, and pointed out that my mom had been wrong to hide Helen's affair, suggesting that if she had been honest with me from the start, I might have been spared from the shame and trauma of catching my wife with another man. My dad nodded in agreement, looking at my mother with disappointment etched across his face. "You're as much at fault as Helen for supporting her through this," he said. "By trying to protect her, you only helped to break your son's trust. You should have known better." The weight of their words bore down on my mother, and I could see the defenses she had put up beginning to crumble. I turned to her, my voice trembling with a mixture of anger and hurt. "Mom, as much as it pains me to know that Helen betrayed me, it hurts even more to see you continue to support my cheating partner. I never expected this from you." I guess our words finally struck a nerve, and my mother's composure shattered. She burst into tears, the weight of her actions finally hitting her like a freight train. She expressed her remorse, stating that she had always thought me and Helen would have a family together, and it was hard for her to let it go. She wished for us to work on our marriage because she truly believed that we could fix things. But now, seeing my anguish, she promised to stop pushing. She kept saying, "I just wanted you to be happy," in between her tears. Since this incident, my mother has blocked Helen and has promised to stay out of my divorce. Helen's parents and my dad agree with me getting a divorce and will push Helen to get a paternity test when the time comes. Update 3: It's been almost 9 months since I last updated. For everyone who keeps asking me in my DMs, I want to inform you that Helen has given birth, and we had a paternity test done. It turns out that I'm not the father of the baby, yay. I have since divorced Helen and am now living peacefully in my own apartment. I'm really happy with the way my life has turned out, and also about the fact that I won't have to pay any child support. My mom and I have improved our relationship over time, and she continues to be no contact with Helen, just like she had promised me.